Right. I want you to think back to your last food shop. You walked in, grabbed the usual stuff, a loaf of bread, some butter, a pack of chicken, maybe a bar of chocolate. And when you got to the till, something just felt off. It wasn't dramatic. Nobody robbed you, but you definitely handed over more than you expected. That feeling is not in your head. It's real. And today I'm going to walk you through exactly what's happened to food prices in this country and Marcel, where it started, when it got really ugly, and what it looks like right now in 2026, with real prices from the supermarkets we all shop in. Tesco, Sainsbury's, Aldi, Waitrose, Morrisons. Stay with me. Some of this will genuinely surprise you. To appreciate how wild things have been, you need to remember what normal used to look like. Cast your mind back to 2020. In that year, grocery prices in the UK were actually falling compared to 2019, down about 0.5% overall. That's right, your chicken was getting cheaper, your coffee was getting cheaper. You could do a weekly shop for around £115 a month per person and not think twice about it. Even in the first half of 2021, things were still pretty stable. Food prices were deflating between late 2020 and mid-2021 by around 0.3 to 0.7%, depending on the product. Supermarkets like Tesco and Asda were competing aggressively on price. Aldi was rapidly expanding, keeping everyone honest. A 4-pint of semi-skimmed milk was sitting comfortably around £1.10. A Hovis 800-gram white loaf? About £1.06. A pack of 6 eggs? Under £1 at most places. It felt sustainable, manageable, normal. And then everything changed. The COVID pandemic had quietly scrambled global supply chains. Factories were running slow, shipping containers were stuck in the wrong places, and demand for goods bounced back almost faster than anyone expected. Costs started creeping up slowly, but most people didn't notice yet. Then, in February 2022, Russia invaded Ukraine, and suddenly the whole world noticed. Here's something that shocked me when I first researched it. Russia and Ukraine together supplied more than half of the world's traded sunflower oil and more than a quarter of all global wheat exports. Think about how many products in your supermarket contain wheat or vegetable oil. Bread, pasta, biscuits, cakes, crisps, ready meals, cooking oil. The list goes on and on. When the war cut those exports off, the price of those ingredients didn't just go up a little. They shot up. Sunflower oil prices rose by over 50%, and wheat prices jumped around 25 to 30%. And at exactly the same time, energy prices across Europe were going through the roof, meaning every factory, every food producer, every refrigerated lorry delivering food to your local Tesco or Sainsbury's was suddenly facing bills they couldn't absorb. What do businesses do when their costs go up and they can't absorb them? They pass them on to you, and the numbers tell the story clearly. A loaf of sliced white bread that cost around £1.06 in November 2021 hit £1.36 just a year later, a jump of about 30p or nearly 29% in 12 months on something as basic as bread. Butter, which had been fairly affordable, started climbing. Eggs started climbing. And once prices started moving, they kept moving. By late 2022, the UK's overall inflation reached a 41-year high of around 11%, but food was already running hotter than that. March 2023 is the month that will go down in history for UK household budgets. That was when food price inflation in this country peaked at its worst in 46 years, hitting around 15% year on year. And you could feel it at every single supermarket. Let's go through some real items and real look prices, because this is where it gets very concrete. Eggs. In 2021, a pack of 6 free-range eggs at Sainsbury's would cost around 89p to £1. By early 2023, driven by a catastrophic bird flu outbreak that wiped out millions of laying hens across the UK and Europe, the same pack had jumped to over £2 in many stores, an increase of more than 100%. Some supermarkets started rationing them. You could only buy 2 packs per visit. At Tesco, at Asda, at Morrisons. Rationing eggs in 2023 in Britain. Butter. A standard 500-gram pack of spreadable butter, which had sat around the £2.50 to £3 mark for years, surged dramatically. By the peak, you were looking at well over £4 at mainstream supermarkets for the same product, around a 50 to 60% increase. Cooking oil. a bottle of vegetable oil that once cost around £1 to £1.20 at most. Supermarkets reached £2.50 and above at various points, driven almost entirely by the collapse in Ukrainian sunflower oil supplies. Chocolate. M&S, Sainsbury's, Tesco. Every single retailer saw chocolate prices climbing. Cocoa supplies had been disrupted by poor harvests in West Africa, and by 2023, bars that once cost £1 were quietly becoming £1.50, then more, up to 50% rise. Meanwhile, the big discounters were trying to hold the line. Aldi and Lidl kept prices lower than the big four: Tesco, Sainsbury's, Asda and Morrisons. And Britons noticed. Between 2022 and 2023, Aldi's sales surged. For the first time ever, Aldi overtook Morrisons to become the UK's fourth largest supermarket. That moment told you everything about the pressure households were under. By late 2023 and through 2024, the headlines started getting more cheerful. Food inflation was falling. And by December 2024, it had dropped down to about 2%, the lowest it had been since 2021. People breathed out. Problem solved, right? Not quite. Here's the thing, the headlines didn't explain clearly enough. Prices weren't going down. They were just going up more slowly. Everything that had already got dramatically more expensive was still expensive. That butter was still over £3. Those eggs were still pricier than 2021. That weekly shop at Tesco or Sainsbury's still cost considerably more than it had 3 years earlier. In fact, between 2020 and 2025, UK food prices rose by nearly 40% in total. To put that in pounds and pence, if you were spending £100 a week on food in 2020, you'd need around £140 to buy the exact same shop in 2025. That's not solved. That's locked in. Just when things seemed to stabilise, 2025 brought another shift. By the summer of 2025, grocery inflation started rising again, climbing back above 5%. It wasn't the explosive spike we saw in 2023, but shoppers could feel their weekly bills creeping up once more. Part of the reason was rising costs inside the UK itself. In April 2024, the national living wage increased to £11.44 an hour. And then in April 2025, it rose again to £12.21. That was great news for workers, but it also meant higher staffing costs for supermarkets, food factories, and logistics companies across the country. And when costs rise across the entire supply chain, some of that inevitably ends up in the price on the shelf. Supermarkets tried to soften the impact with loyalty discounts and promotions, but the price gap between retailers became clearer than ever. According to which, Aldi remained the cheapest supermarket overall, while premium supermarkets were significantly more expensive for the same basket of groceries. For many households, where you shop had now become just as important as what you buy. Grocery inflation came in at 4% in January 2026, the lowest reading since April 2025. That's progress. But food is still getting more expensive, just more slowly. Right now, in early 2026, the items still rising fastest are chocolate, milk, cream, and fresh meat, according to Which's latest data. The items that have eased most are bread and cereals. You can still get own brand white bread at Aldi or Tesco's basics range for under 50p if you look hard enough. Beans and tinned tomatoes are still well under £1. So not everything is a disaster. But the cumulative damage is real. Private label own brand products, Tesco Finest Alternatives, Aldi's specially selected range, Sainsbury's basics lines, now account for more than half of all supermarket purchases in the UK. People who once automatically reached for branded goods are now picking up the store brand without a second thought. And the divide between supermarkets has never been more stark. That basket of 89 items, £164 at Aldi, £189 at Sainsbury's with a Nectar card, £221 at Waitrose. If you're a family of four, which supermarket you choose can make a difference of thousands of pounds over a year. The hardest hit are, predictably, those who are already struggling. Lower-income households spend a much higher share of their money on food than wealthier ones. When prices rise nearly 40% over 5 years, that hits those families disproportionately hard. Food bank usage in the UK has reached record highs. The share of UK households classified as food insecure has risen significantly since 2021, from around 7% to over 11% by 2024. That's roughly 1 in 9 families. And here's the particularly cruel twist. Research has found that healthier foods, fresh fruit, vegetables, lean proteins, have risen in price much faster than less healthy options. So as budgets get tighter, people don't just spend less, they often eat worse. That's a public health problem that will take years to show up in the data, but is already underway. From the calm of 2020, through Ukraine and supply chain chaos, through record food price rises, through a brief respite that turned out not to be a solution, to here in 2026, where food is still rising in price and your weekly shop costs significantly more than it did 5 years ago. The supermarkets are competing hard. Aldi and Lidl in particular are doing the most for squeezed families, but even they can't fully insulate you from what's happening in global food markets. What you can do is stay informed, know the prices, know which stores give you the most for your money. And if you found this video useful, hit like, subscribe, and drop a comment below. Which item has hit your budget hardest? Eggs? Chocolate? Butter? Let me know. I read every single one. See you in the next one.